Hi, it's Jennifer Evans with Empowering Wellness Counseling Solutions, and we are talking about universal constructs this week. There are 5 universal constructs, 5 things that we all think, feel, and need in our lives. And the way in which we interact with them, the way in which we get triggered by them, the way in which we get defensive and how we protect ourselves against them is why it's so hard to interact with people in life. It's because we're all fighting for these 5 things, and these 5 things will multiply our success. It will also deplete our success. So when we get into these perceived expectations, like we talked about 2 weeks ago, so go back to those previous videos, we know that these universal constructs are kicking off our perceived expectations, the lenses that we are creating. And those 5 universal constructs, I'm going to get to them in a moment, so stay tuned, is what is causing us to live in life, to kick off those 4 barriers to trauma: fear of success, fear of failure, self-sabotage, and scarcity mindset. That is what is pulling you in and further away from your success, is because we get triggered, and it's because of these 5 constructs. And these 5 constructs are a need to be seen or heard, a need to feel belonged, or like a sense of belonging, I should say, a sense of value and feeling like you are valued, feeling like you have agency or control over a situation, and feeling like you are secure or safe in a situation. And we have one thing that we are like, it's like we talk a lot about triggers. It's our trigger, right? When that door opens and we don't feel like we have one of those, then all the other doors open. So some people really get upset and they spiral in this negative cycle, and they put on this filter of why is it so hard for me? And they just can't see, why does everybody else get things and why don't I get things? And that's usually because they don't feel like they are seen and heard. Other people feel like, or maybe they don't feel like they have agency. I mean, it really is an interesting dynamic that when you don't have one, a sense of lack of value comes in, and then all the other ones are connected. And if you click on the link in my description, there's actually a diagram to show you how these are all connected. But basically, when you have the value get connected or tripped off, then what's happening is you're not feeling like you belong, and so insecure attachment comes in, and we don't feel like we're seen and heard. People pleasing come in. And then when we don't feel safe and we don't feel like we have agency, then again, we're trying to kind of create either avoidance, we're pushing people away so that we can have a perceived sense of control, or we are seeking a sense of validation. So we are engaging in a lot of social media. We're trying to find that external validator. And so these 5 constructs, understanding what the need to belong, let's go into every single one of them. Understanding the need to belong. A sense of belonging means that we feel and connected to our environment. And what can happen is when we stop feeling connected to our environment, like depression and anxiety comes in, then we start to isolate and we start pulling away. And we get into, and we'll talk a little more about this later in the week, a self-fulfilling prophecy. As we pull away, then what is happening is we're pulling away from other people, so they are pulling away from us, and we are recapitulating or re-seeing exactly what we fear most. When we have personal agency and control, or we don't have personal agency and control, then we're feeling as if we are overwhelmed. We feel like there's nothing that we can do. We feel helpless and hopeless, two key symptoms to depression. Like we do not have an ability to get out of this situation. The power of feeling valued is what's going to, like I said, kick off kind of all the other feelings. So at some point in time, whatever your precursors are, at some point value will kick off and kind of connect all of them together. And so whether it's implicit messaging or chronic trauma in childhood, oftentimes we have a sense of just not feeling valued, and we show that in a lot of ways as we get into the negative cycle. We're overworking, underpaid, we are not eating very well for ourselves, we're not taking time to care for ourselves. All of these are signs that we're not having and connecting to a sense of power of feeling valued. And on the flip side, when we do, we are really engaged in that positive cycle. The value piece really does connect to the negative cycle, to the positive cycle. When we feel valued, we do things for ourselves. When we don't feel valued, we don't do things for ourselves. And it connects to a lot of our other needs as we interact with others. Safety and security is a big one. I feel like it is a lot of implicit messaging comes from this sense of safety and security. And what that means is that when we have a lot of stress in our lives, and if you think about the baby boomers, they were born from parents who survived World War I and World War II. And so kind of pick them up by the bootstraps is a common phrase that they use. Their sense of security was not there. And so a lot of the decisions and implicit messaging they were giving the Gen Z or Gen Xers and millennials is that you have to kind of have your ducks in a row. You can't count on everything, so you have to be the one to do it. And those messagings are still kind of in us, and we start seeing, if you start having performance trauma, that's the messaging that's kind of coming up for your performance trauma. And another big one, another one of our constructs is being seen and heard. And being seen and heard is really the sense that like we matter, that we exist. And it really is defeating when you don't feel like you exist. One of the reasons suicide is so high, especially in adolescence, is because of bullying. Because people feel invincible. Because of social media, people feel invincible. They feel like they need to do these things, grab these external validators, because they don't feel good enough unless they do these things. Marketing really plies on this vulnerability to say, I will make you the greatest. I will make you seen and heard. I will give you everything if you buy my product. Marketing does a really good job applying at this basic construct of needing to feel seen and heard. And social media really spins it up too, making us, feel more and more defeated. So when we can ground and connect to our own values, then we are the determinant of our own value, our own ability to see ourselves and hear ourselves. But when we take that away from ourselves because we are avoiding, because we are escaping, then we are creating this own misery and despair. And you can go back to a couple weeks ago, we talked about gratitude and suffering and how that builds our filter, and it ultimately comes from being seen and heard. And so what we want to do is knowing that these are inevitable. They are inside all of us. It's not like, well, I'm not going to do all that. That's not my thing. No, it's inside of you. It's inside of everybody. It's understanding how we're getting defensive and recognizing when other people are being defensive. Like, oh, They just opened a door that they didn't mean to open, or they didn't want to open, but it's open. And now what are we going to do with it? A door just opened to me. What are we going to do about it? Understanding your defensive triggers, where you are starting to put up your little army people. You're putting up your wall. I'm trying to think of like the, when I went to Europe, they had like the outer wall, and then you had the city and the inner wall. And I am blanking on that name right now. But you're putting up the gates, you've got the moats. When all of that is happening is because you're protecting yourself around these constructs. And so how do you recognize? Body scans. Body scans help you recognize. Start feeling where the tension is and start slowly releasing that tension. Notice what your fists are doing. Often you will be in a fight, flight, or freeze state. So you will be fighting, getting ready to kind of put your defenses up. You may like get that rapid heart rate and like, I gotta go. Or you just might freeze and feel like everything is drained from you and you don't know what to do. Use these to level up. And I've got a video on how to use these to level up. So go back to Stress Management Week. And so what we want to do is find these healthy and protective behaviors versus these defensive triggers where we are starting to shut down. We're getting into the negative dynamic, and we'll talk about that later this week. So subscribe and stay tuned. And leaning in on the healthy and protective behaviors. And healthy and protective behaviors are the things that nurture us and that allow us to connect back to agency, because agency is the fix. When we can close the agency door and say, no, I'm good. I have control over my thoughts, my feelings, and my behaviors. And as long as I focus on that, then nothing else in the world matters. I can focus on this. All the other doors will close. As one opens, they all open, and as one closes, they all close. So we know that a sense of value will open up all the doors, and a sense of agency will close all the doors. So that's what we're leaning onto, is focusing on what do I have agency over? How do I neutralize the cycle, stay present, and realize what I have agency in the here and now? Do one thing. One thing will get you into and start a positive cycle. And as we talked about last week, there is a metamorphosis of resiliency. When we are avoiding, we are not resilient. We are not on that metamorphosis growth cycle. So the first thing we want to do to build emotional resiliency is the Summer of George. For anybody who's ever watched Seinfeld, there's a series of episodes where it's the Summer of George. George decides that he's a short, fat, bald, stocky man who has no job, who cannot keep a relationship. So he says, everything that I've ever done has led me here, which is nowhere. I'm going to choose to do the opposite action. And that's all it is opposite action. If I would normally go right, then I'm going to go left. And what happens is he ends up getting a fiance. He ends up getting a job with the Yankees. Like, lots of things happen by just starting with the opposite action. So if your tendency is to shy away or shut down or avoid, get on your phone and scroll. Choose one thing that is the opposite of that. Engage in something. Be connected to it. And then we build emotional tolerance. We're just trying to ground and be present. Like, half of the game is grounding and being present. Mindfulness truly is the foundation to wellness. You gotta have your mindfulness, and it's important. And there's several videos to talks about mindfulness. It truly is like really half the game is just fighting to be mindful. And as you become mindful, then you can be more purpose-driven and find agency. And as we build a growth mindset, radical acceptance, and self-compassion, then we're truly emotionally resilient, which will take us everywhere in life. It will allow us to achieve all our goals. So 5 constructs we all have that is either pushing you forward and you are rocking a positive cycle, or it's holding you back and you are triggered and it is forcing you to be defensive, which is preventing you from ever being able to be on the offense, on a ability to score points, because you're just constantly protecting and defending for yourself. I'm Jennifer Evans with Empowering Wellness Counseling Solutions. Please click the like, share this with somebody who could use this. We are all beginning our new year. This is the time. Do we buy into ourselves, or do we begin another negative cycle? Thank you so much.